So when and where did you start your social work practice?
Well, when I graduated from the Carleton University School of Social Work in 1975, I started working at the Children's Aid Society of Ottawa Carleton.
Okay. And what drew you to the profession?
I guess when I was in university, I really didn't even know what social work was, but I had done volunteer work in high school at the Y, and then during university I had volunteered at a settlement house in Toronto. My undergraduate degree is from the University of Toronto, and it's at the settlement house. This was for new immigrants or families on welfare. It really provided services for the community. That's when I met social workers, and so I sort of started talking to them, and gee, it sounded interesting. So that's how I ended up in social work.
So what was your primary area of practice?
Well, I guess you would say I ended my career in sort of program and policy development and program implementation and management. But I started off working for the Children's Aid for about 8 years as a protection worker and then as an adoption worker. And out of the blue, I was approached by somebody from the International Adoption Desk at Health and Welfare. They needed a social worker for a short period of time to cover off for somebody who had gone on a secondment elsewhere. So it was supposed to be 3 months, ended up a year and a half, and then I was approached by another area to replace somebody else. And again, they wanted a social worker. This was National Welfare Grants, where they gave money to the provinces or territories or non-governmental organizations to pilot tests, programs or projects. For example, and we're talking the early 80s, but in Toronto, there's a well-known seniors, I can't even remember the name of it now, but it has a Bayview. Bayview has a hospital and has different programs, a seniors program, or residence for seniors, a nursing home, the whole gamut of services. And they wanted to pilot test a program called Caring for the Caregivers. Now, of course, everybody knows about that now, but this was the early 80s. It was the first pilot program in Canada. So it was fun working in that program. And then from there, I ended up moving on to different programs in the federal government, but always social service, social justice programs, so directly related to social work.
Because you're the only person that we've interviewed that has worked in government and policy. And I'm wondering if you can, or if you're able to talk a little bit more about what that's like. What's that like to work within government, at that policy level?
Well, it's fascinating. It's very, very challenging, especially if you don't really have a policy mind. You're more practical, feet on the ground kind of person. And in government, often they will have a policy branch or a policy section, and they're the ones that will draw up the memorandum to cabinet. And then people like me will deliver these programs. But for a period of time, I worked in crime prevention. And this used to be part of justice, now it's part of public safety. But in crime prevention, I actually was the pen on a memorandum to cabinet. And this is sort of designing it. There was a focus on crime prevention, and how were we going to do this with the provinces and territories, and giving non-governmental organizations, municipalities, opportunities to pilot test things, to research, to evaluate. And so it was figuring out the different elements of this policy document and then seeking approval from cabinet for it. So that's like there is a cabinet committee that determines whether they will approve, and you put in a request for a certain amount of money. They might approve the total request, I don't know, say 100 million over 5 years. I'm just pulling that out of my hat. Or they might reduce the amount of money. It's really a question of selling your case. And there are competing interests, so there's never any guarantee you will get what you ask for. So then, as I say, normally that's people working in policy, that's what they, if the particular party in power has an idea of what they want it to do, and this was the Liberal Party in the, I should say, late 90s, they wanted to do something about crime prevention. So really, that's where the idea came from. But then normally it'd be the policy people, but in this case it was people working in the program area that tried to factor in what elements there could be. And then of course we were responsible for implementing it. Does that help?
So before social work became part of a college, the professionalization of the profession, what was it like to practice in those years?
Well, I'm thinking somehow, well, maybe that's naivete, but I always thought of myself as a professional. So the only thing I can think of that was different, and this was when the college was associated with the association, this requirement to make sure you were taking courses, that you could prove that you were doing something, you were keeping on top of your field. Well, I ended up working in the federal government starting in '84, but I went to conferences, certain types of conferences. It might be a conference on family violence prevention, but I was always trying to keep my skill set up to date of what was happening, what new approaches. But I think that with the college, that it really has professionalized the profession.
Is there a social work contribution or accomplishment you're particularly proud of?
I was thinking about that. I managed the National Clearinghouse on Family Violence at Health and Welfare, which later became Health Canada. And I was very proud of that because the clearinghouse held materials. It could be fact sheets, it could be articles, it could be almost little books related to child abuse, domestic violence, men who abuse, and probably 80,000 people a year access the clearinghouse. There would be mail-outs, or there would, as the years went by, of course you can access things online, but we were always contracting people to update the fact sheets or update the articles, or there was the very first violence against women survey in Canada, and to have materials related to that in the clearinghouse. So I was very proud that social workers working across the country, researchers, students, could all access materials from the clearinghouse.
Given what you now know, is there anything you would do differently in your career if you could go back?
I was thinking about that I did my master's at Carleton during the structural intervention years, but I tried very hard to take a group work class, very practical ones, because I knew that I wanted to be a frontline person. Now in hindsight, I didn't end up working in the front line, so I think I would have been better to have been more of a generalist. Well, I guess it's all changed now. You do your BSW first, so that's where you could get a lot of frontline work, and then maybe in your master's, because I think it would have been helpful to know more about research, evaluation, even policy development. I mean, I shied away from all of those courses, and I think to do it, so I learned hands-on. But I think I should have had more of an open mind to different possibilities, because you don't know where your career will lead.
So what were some of the challenges or barriers you worked to overcome during your career, and who, if anyone, did you have as an ally?
Well, I was thinking, I'm a doer, and I have an ability to a clear writing style, just very straightforward. But I'm not a particularly articulate speaker. And in a sense, in any area, you need all three. And so with support of peers and managers over the years, both at the Children's Aid, in the federal government, learning from clients and colleagues through the association Eastern Branch, I think I've been associated with either on the program committee or on the board for more than 15 years, probably closer to 18 years. And it's people like Marg Nelson and Glenn Drover that are amazing individuals, and you just sort of, they're like people you can admire, and they're inspirations. And so I think, again, going back to my peers and my managers, I've been very, very fortunate to learn from other people.
What words of wisdom would you like to share with today's social workers?
I guess, well, I'm going back to some of the things I said, but I think to be open to learning experiences, whether they're at school or if you volunteer somewhere to sit on a board or do just your tiny little piece of the pie. You can't help but learn how to do other things. And social work is a challenging career, but it's fascinating, and you meet the most wonderful people, and you work with the most wonderful people, and they can be clients, they can be peers, they can be supervisors. It's a wonderful career. I have no regrets.